Good.
Busy woman. Sorry, I had to push a button all the way back there and then run up here. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. My name is Leslie M. Scott Jones. I am the curator of learning engagement and public programs here at the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. I'm also the artistic director of the Charlottesville Players Guild. And I am so excited for this conversation that's about to happen here. Two of my absolute favorite people in the world. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But I wanted to tell you that we still have so many things going on during the symposium. Damani Harrison and Justin Emeka are going to talk about the men of August Wilson. We still have, Teresa still has to do her master class, directing the Black theatrical voice. Justin is doing a master class, Shakespeare and the Black aesthetic. And we can't forget our final big conversation, The Gift of Wilson, where all of our practitioners, professional and local, will be on this stage and have a conversation. Tonight, after this talk, we have presentation of Abiyoyo, a song story by Xavier Taylor. And then Friday night, we have a presentation by CPG of Wilson's theatrical memoir, How I Learned What I Learned. So please register, get your tickets, get in here. This is an amazing week of conversation and performance, and you don't want to miss it. So I've said all I need to say, and I'm going to turn it over to these amazing women to introduce themselves and start some conversation.
Yeah.
Sure. Greetings, everyone. My name is Tawnya Pettiford-Wates. I go by Dr. T. And I always tell people, you know, I'm from a family of six. There's 6 siblings. We're all T's.
Huh.
And so we go by T1, T2, T3, T4, etc. That's what we call each other. So no one ever calls me by my first name. They always call me T1. I'm T1.
You're T1?
Yes, I'm T1.
Dr. T1?
Dr. T1.
Yeah,
because there are other doctors too.
Oh, okay. I think so too.
A couple of medical doctors, couple, PhDs, and my parents did a good job.
I was about to say, it's very proud.
They did a good job.
Yeah.
So I come from, I'm living in Richmond, Virginia now. I teach at Virginia Commonwealth University. I teach in the School of the Arts in the theater department. And my practice is Black theater and teaching the Black aesthetic. And I also have a methodology called ritual poetic drama within the African continuum, which is a new approach to actor training. That is how I structure my classes. I teach a class called solo performance. So I do a lot of devising theater work. I teach a class called solo performance, where the students use ritual poetic drama within the African continuum to create their pieces, to create their solo work. I've been around a long time. I went to school at Carnegie Mellon University and also studied at Central School of Drama Speech in London, England. And when I got out of college, I went to New York to see a play called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow's Come. And I said I needed to be in that play. I called them up, and long story short, I got in the play. And that was my Broadway debut, and then I went out on the national tour, and I called that my graduate training, actually. Actually, it transformed my whole life, transformed my practice, transformed my perspective on what theater is
what theater is supposed to be and what I want to make it. I fell into teaching. It is not something that I had planned to do. I fell into it, and in the course of my study, where I was actually using my students to help me discover and explore this new practice, because I did not want to teach Stanislavski, even though that's what I was trained in. Which, by the way, if you're not a theater person, that is a methodology. That is the main methodology that they use in Western theater training, in arts education. I knew that I didn't want to be teaching that. And so I used a studio space that I had in Seattle, Washington, which is where I lived before I came to Richmond, Virginia. And we created work in that studio space using the methodology, which then created a company that is called the Conciliation Project. That's where my sort of social justice theater chops were formed. I did not want to start a company. I did not want to be the artistic director of a theater company, but it was calling to happen, and the community supported it, and so that's what I did. So the Conciliation Project was birthed in 2001, and it moved with me when I moved to Virginia. And we incorporated in Virginia in 2006. So the company is more than 2 decades old, and we have been doing and devising social justice theater work ever since. So I'm an educator, an activist, a playwright, a performer myself, a director. I am, a producer, and intricately bound to this thing called the dramatic arts, because I found it to be one of the most powerful tools that there is to look at the world, to interrogate the world and people and humanity and groups and practices and institutions and so forth and so on. So I'm gonna, I have a long acting resume as well as a directing resume, but I don't want to talk about that right now. We came here to talk about something. We came here to talk about something completely different. So I'll turn it over to my host.
I'm just the lady sitting up here with talking to you. No, my name is Teresa Dowell-Vest. I am a child of Charlottesville. I'm happy to be home.
Nice.
It's good to be
Nice.
Yeah. So happy to see you, Mickey.
It's so nice.
Born and raised here in Charlottesville. Saw my first August Wilson play in the mid-'80s when Fences made its way to UVA.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my first time seeing professional actors on stage who looked like me.
In 1980.
No, in the 80s. It was like maybe close to 86.
Okay.
I was in high school. And by that time, I decided that, because I was a foot taller than everyone else in my class, and in a lot of spaces, I was the only Black person in my class. I felt odd and alien until I saw Whoopi Goldberg do her one-woman show on Broadway. Spook show just kind of said that me in my awkwardness and in my Blackness and in my womanness, there was space for me. And someone who looked and felt like Whoopi was holding court. And couple that with seeing Fences and hearing Rose stand up for herself so eloquently, seeing Troy fight tooth and nail for his own joy and happiness and existence, resonated with me. Whereas theater was always something reserved for other people, this sort of elite sort of thing. If you didn't know anything about Shakespeare, then, and it was just like, for the first time I heard people who look and sound like me, sound like my dad, sound like my family, right? So that was the first time I felt welcomed in the space, and oddly enough, in person, it was August Wilson's work that opened that door. I later went and studied theater at James Madison University, and then decided I needed to get on the First Thing Spoken to Southern California, where I wanted to go since I saw Cheryl Miller and the McGee twins play basketball for the University of Southern California. And that's all I thought I wanted. But I wasn't that good at basketball. I was good in my mind. So I still made it to Southern California. So I went to grad school at Cal State Long Beach and studied theater. And switched gears from acting to producing. My department chair said he didn't know what to do with me. I was the first Black person to be in that MFA program. They cast me in a production of Cyrano with a big blonde wig and a powder blue dress, and I was like, "This is it. I don't think I get to do this anymore." And so he said, "Well, we're starting a new program in management, theater management, and producing. And it's a hybrid program with the business program and with the arts." And you can learn how to produce your own projects, which then means you will never really have to audition for anyone else ever if you decide to want to create your own work. And so that's what I had my MFA in. It's in producing. And it allowed me to see theater from a different vantage point, from the place of business, from the insistence of going into a space and going, this right here for the next 6 weeks belongs to us. And we're going to tell a story, right? And after graduation, I made my way back to Charlottesville. I lived in New York for about 3 months and realized I did not have it. I couldn't do it. And I came home to Charlottesville in 97, 98 and found Live Arts Theater. Live Arts Theater is where I think I could best say I honed my skills as a director. And directed a few plays there, but in particular directed 7 Guitars. When I tell you, that is still one of the highlights of my life. Directing that show with a set that had 5 tons of real dirt. The stage director, the set designer, who was also the artistic director of Live Arts, John Gibson, he had a vision of turning that whole theater, not just the stage, whole theater into a backyard a la Hill District style. And so he purchased, bless his heart, he purchased 10 tons of dirt, thinking that's what it required, but only 5 tons of dirt would fit into the theater. So for about 6 weeks, we had a mound of dirt outside the theater and just a sign that says free dirt. On behalf of the cast and crew of 7 Guitars, you can have this Pittsburgh dirt. I mean, it wasn't Pittsburgh, but of course it just lent itself to the theme. And of course it was Headley's Garden that really, where, that soft dirt where Clinton Johnston, who played Headley in that production, he just dig his hands into that dirt, and he was using that machete to find his money that, Buddy Molden owed him, and and it was just a visceral experience for all of them. And that time period allowed me to see theater as an act of resistance, as an act of advocacy. I was then commissioned to write Vinegar Hill, play about this community that this school sits in, that was decimated by abject whiteness and capitalism and racism, and in the name of growth and urban renewal. And the ground we stand on is one of the few pieces of history that remains, because there were so many people who said education wins the day every time. We got to keep the school. And so I come back to the situation, having gone back to LA. I went back to LA in 2003. I loved film. I kind of tripped and fell into film and moved away from theater for a while, just because in LA it just seemed like that's where I could work. But I stayed in theater just to kind of keep the lifeblood going, and I directed Pearl Cleage's Flying West and was nominated for an NAACP award for that. Which said my people was okay with what I was doing. That's right. And the arts sometimes, especially here in Charlottesville, I couldn't gauge that all the time, because the theater wasn't it didn't always feel like a space that local Black people congregated towards. And I'm just so proud of what Leslie is doing here.
Yes,
at the Jet.
too. Let's give her.
Because I think even more so in my experience in film, theater has always been that place where after you see the show, there's the conversation, the discussion, and the walking orders. So with August Wilson's work, and I think, as we get to, currently I live in Houston with my wife, Michelle, and up until September 1st, I was the director of film and television production for the university, and now I'm the department head for the Department of Languages and Communication. And I still don't talk about or teach theater as much as I would like, but I do incorporate August Wilson into our film discussions because we talk about the power of being able to create your own universes. And I think very few writers had done that as effectively as August Wilson. I tell my students all the time, if you want to use film, television, theater, any of the arts as a modality of change, be a writer, because then you control the universe. You create your existence. And August Wilson, Octavia Butler, Audre Lorde, those are the ones with the sage wisdom of create your own universe, and you'll find freedom there. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, so we're having a conversation about the women of August Wilson. I have to say that for me, my first intersection with August Wilson was way back in college because I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. My father is a descendant of the North Side of Pittsburgh. He took me to the Crawford Grill. He took, so a lot of the things, Wiley Avenue, and the Hill District. I became kind of a woman there in that. So August Wilson, and he was good friends with one of my professors at Carnegie Mellon. And August always wanted to hear his words, like he wanted to hear actors read his words. And who better to read than a bunch of students? You don't have to pay, you don't have to, and we had that. Now he wasn't famous then, by the way. He was just August Wilson, a playwright. He was the dude working on a script. A dude working on a script. Yeah. And so that was where I first encountered his words. And then it's so interesting because I ended up in Seattle, Washington, which is where August Wilson ended up, in Seattle, Washington. So then I met him as the famous August Wilson. And the first play I saw was Fences, and it was at the Seattle Rep. And I remember walking into the theater and looking at the set and saying, that's my grandmama's porch, and that's the alley that I grew up running up and down, the cobblestones and whatever. I mean, it looked so much like Pittsburgh. Yeah. I didn't realize what I was then going to experience with the story of Fences. But anyway, that was my, and so then I did have the opportunity actually to meet him and talk with him on several occasions because as the almost resident playwright there at the Seattle Rep, we had an opportunity to intersect on multiple occasions, and he didn't even remember the Carnegie Mellon. I mean, he had a vague memory, but it wasn't really solid. And I didn't look anything like I looked then. When I encountered him. So anyway, I have loved August Wilson since the beginning. And I teach every fall the century cycle in my Black theater class. And the thing that I do, and the women always come up. Yeah. Right? They always come up. The thing that I do, however, is I don't do it in chronological order of the decades. I do it in the order in which August Wilson wrote the plays, because I feel like that is the most insightful look into the playwright and the development of the playwright over the years, and including and especially including the women. You know, where we begin and where we end are completely different.
So many people assume Ma Rainey was like his first, but Jitney was his first.
That's right. Even though it got put in a drawer, it got put in a drawer.
And you can definitely tell. You know, if we're talking about the evolution of his relationship with character development, you could tell he went from writing for an ensemble with Jitney, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, to honing in on a hero, honing in on a protagonist that had a desperate and immediate, urgent want.
Yes.
Right. And Troy, I think the reason why suddenly Fences becomes that breakout piece for Wilson is that he finally understood that we needed a person to guide us, as opposed to which of these people can we most latch on to emotionally, right? And I don't know, even later as Jitney became more of a commercial hit because we were so enamored with Wilson.
Yeah.
I still don't think that hitch is there with Jitney, right? It's just a really quick, quippy piece where you go, these are really cool characters, but where is the heart, right? I have my issues with Ma Rainey. We can get to that. But with Fences is a love story between what feels like August and Black men, his brothers, between Troy and Rose, despite the flaws in that relationship, between a man and his sons, his family, his community, his people, his interest in making sure that his son knows that it may not come easily, but my love comes thorough.
Yes.
And I think that's why it all resonated, and that becomes the piece.
The breakout.
Yeah. But Rose, my heart breaks for her because her heart breaks so thoroughly in loving Troy. But it also feels like that keeps coming up for the women.
It does.
In Wilson's work.
It does.
Is he responsible for writing, the most dynamic, or at least, the most sensational female characters? No. I don't think he could possibly do it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Why is that on his shoulders? Exactly. The better question is, why do we then look to our Black playwrights, our Black filmmakers, our Black musicians, our Black whomever that gets a little moment in the sun as being the representation of us, and put on their shoulders to make everything right? And so I try not to put that on Wilson. I try not to go, well, what about me?
Right.
Where's my voice in this beautiful arrangement of work? And I think as I have gotten older, what I've realized was they didn't need to be out front to be significant.
That's right.
To the story, and especially to these men. Whereas the men are they're the representation of a very particular, urgent, and almost desperate desire for strength, desire for their manhood to always be respected. There's a person who embodies humanity and grace and empathy in ways that are void.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. He tried his best.
He's flawed. I mean, we are all flawed.
Sure.
But Troy's flaws are huge.
Sure.
And very impactful. However, I still see him as heroic. I still see him as heroic. And often when we are discussing Wilson, the women in the class, here we are, we're in 2000, what are we in? 23.
Yeah. I think I said 2013 about 6 times in the last week. So yeah.
Yeah, we're in 2023. And, we are in a different place. Women are. The whole discussion about gender, the whole discussion about identity and what is feminine, and what is femininity, and, what is our, as women, the scope and range of our womanhood. And so when we're doing fences, the women immediately, and I have to say, when I was their age and I was seeing fences, I might have been a little older than they are, because I was out of college and I was married and, had a child. But when I saw it, I was a little, I saw Mary Alice, the person who originated the role. And God rest her heart. Hey, Mary. Anyway, I was a little salty about Rose. I was a little salty about. I loved the moment when she said, "This baby got a mama, but you are a womanless man." That was like, I was like, yes, thank that the baby didn't have anything to do with it. And that's Rose, she is, yes, the grace of her. And the fact that then that baby actually served as some healing for her as well. I believe that Raynell gave Rose some healing that helped to redeem the hurt, and helped to redeem the deposit that she had, she had poured into the ground that was hard and rocky and wasn't never going, because Raynell proved that different. She changed that. That was a transformative moment. But I have to say, I at that point I agreed, right? But now I have to speak to these young women and I say, that is not August Wilson's fault, right? And the time period in which the play happened. And Rose even says herself, that was my choice. I chose to do this, that, and the other. She actually says that. That's not your dad. I gave him, what I did is I gave him all the room and didn't leave any place for me. Yeah. And now we know that as women, we can recognize that. I don't have to do that. I don't have to give everything. I don't have to. And so I said, let's keep reading and let's see what happens to how August develops and writes characters and writes the women. And let's have this conversation after we finish the whole
Sure. Because by the time you get to Esther, who's the oracle, literally the oracle of, she shows up in what, three plays, right? Yesterday, Darnell Walker and I were here talking about how does August Wilson's work translate from stage to film? And would there ever be a way to see August Wilson's work in a cinematic mode? And that works as well. That works on film. Yes. And I think Leslie and Darnell asked me if out of all the August Wilson plays, which one would I be most interested in adapting into film? And I said, none of them. I would seek the permission to create something new, asking Aunt Esther to be the vessel through which we see the entire century. Like the oracle. She really would be, right? And that is me also in my desire to say, in a way, hey, August, I'm gonna call upon this woman that you've called upon in your wisdom later as your writing developed, to say, well, this is the one who in her omnipotence saw the whole thing happen. Saw the whole thing. Yes. And so for my money, that's where the cinematic piece can live. It could be almost like A Wrinkle in Time, but very Octavia Butler, because we're in the future. But I see over time through Seven Guitars and a little bit earlier with Two Trains Running, it seemed like Wilson's work became more responsive to community
Yes.
and how women
Yes.
were under amplified, but definitely the backbone of so many different movements in each decade,
Mhm.
whether it's the civil rights movement and in the domain as
Mhm.
depicted in Two Trains Running, or certainly the work that kind of dresses Jitney in the 70s with the Black Arts Movement. And even though we don't have the women's voices necessarily in that piece, we know that since he wrote that in that time period, it's kind of infused in it. And Aunt Esther, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like he must have, I said August like I know him by his name, like the way that Mr. King Wilson, that somehow he must have started to tap into something that went into sci-fi. Like I look at his work as being hyper realistic, right?
know, yes.
I
It has
mean,
that. Yes.
but he somewhere along the way said, let's play with this outer worldness and give this woman this sort of ability to outlive everything. That's everybody.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then I received that as penance almost. I feel a little bit of some kind of way saying that, but I'm like, you owe me all this. You took Ma Rainey. I know a lot of people love Ma Rainey.
Yes.
I start to feel some kind of way with how
it became about the men.
It became about the men.
Yes.
It's about this.
Even though the name on the thing said Ma Rainey.
The whole thing says Ma Rainey.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have this woman who had a very particular existence. Out of all the characters in all of his plays, she was the one person who existed, like really existed. Who really existed in the world. And I give some grace and some forgiveness because it was his second piece. It was early in his writing career.
It also was the only piece that was outside of Pittsburgh.
You're right. There's that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But at some point when he gave us Esther,
you said, you're redeemed.
I was locked in. Because he needed us to have someone who embodied the DNA of Africa and all of that history.
Yes.
But had the fortitude and vision to outlive us all. And that would be who I would want to see be the vessel of telling the story.
Which is the metaphor for Black people. I feel. Sure. I feel the resilience of Black people to have come from the beginning. To have come from the beginning all the way to, and all of the mythology surrounding the Middle Passage, surrounding the people who could fly stories, surrounding, lots of mythology around in the African continuum, in African storytelling. I think he really connected. Hence, Aunt Esther.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love to watch people kind of try to figure it out. The characters in the play, and even the people who are reading the plays, and in our discussion, they're like, how is Aunt Esther 54 years old or whatever the number is?
I think reading the play for Gem of the Ocean, it felt like Shakespeare, in that I really had to kind of release reality in a way that that I hadn't done with any of his work before. At least with Seven Guitars, I can go, I'm in the backyard, and they're listening on the radio to the big fight, and they're and Floyd is really working Vera, trying to plead his case, and there's a rooster somewhere back there, and all that felt familiar. Gem of the Ocean, I was like, I'm going on a ride.
Yes.
And again, I think that's spoke to his growth, but the way Esther serves as a guide was also refreshing.
And a stage. like the Oracle,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and she giving people the answer by asking them the question.
Do you all
Do you guys have any questions?
at the same time, no one else is here. We're just,
Yeah.
I mean, we love y'all being here, but we're sitting here just oozing and blazing eloquently about August Wilson. And, you know, I think with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I keep coming back to that, you know, Gertrude Rainey was a revolutionary. During the Harlem Renaissance, there were only maybe 3 Black women who would host gatherings in their home, you know, within this community of artists,
Yeah.
singers, poets, whomever. And it was a queer community.
Yes.
I mean, Ma Rainey wrote music about the women she dated, and they became mainstream hits, you know, relative of that time, right? And there felt to me to be an erasing of her
In the construction of that.
Yeah. I read some, there was an interview that August Wilson did when contested about the women in his stories. And he said, the reporter asked him if he ever regretted not writing for women. And he was like, no, I don't regret the stories that I've told because I'm speaking from a place I know. We talk about, you know, in terms of writing, the #1 rule is what? Write what you know.
That's right. That's right.
And he goes, I don't even try to assume any sort of reality I don't fully know. And so in that answer, I think I really appreciated not trying to traverse a lane that he wasn't really in, but it didn't excuse erasing a lane that he wasn't in either. Does it make sense?
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But I had a crush on Vera.
Yeah.
I was like, Floyd. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a sweetness to her. And I think it's only because of the vinegar that was in Louise, in some guitars, and the sassiness of Ruby that made Vera just go, who would leave her?
Yes.
Like, who would leave her?
Yeah.
And so that too is in his writing. I don't know. I think Seven Guitars might be the play where there are more women in that than any other.
But in more complex women.
Right.
More
Right.
complex women.
And so he had these 2 pillars opposite on both sides of Vera that allows her wholesomeness, her being the person who would be the most compassionate, who would be the one to make the most beautiful home. Ruby was like this. If you got something to give me, I'll take it.
Transaction.
Deeply. Yeah. Louise will cut your throat and watch you bleed. So you have somewhere in the middle that strength, that sassiness, that sexiness, that wholesomeness, all in this person. And I always wanted to know who was Vera in August's life.
Like, yes. Because you know what? August often, like if you got him into a conversation, talked about the women that raised him,
right?
The women that he knew, you know, not only his mother, but other women that were so important to him. And
what was that like, though, having those conversations? I mean, you had that experience.
Yes. I mean, it was very, you know, after I stopped fangirling, you know, with him, he was just I think he was such a champion for women, which is what I knew, even though there was some conflict with some of the women that he wrote. But I felt like he wrote many he wrote many more women than a lot of people, right? You know, and the book and the monologues. Oh, the monologues are just juicy. You know, so you know, it was. I have always appreciated him because he is a master storyteller, and I believe in the transformative power of story and the stories within the context of the play itself. Those stories that he tells. The piece that I think is going to be done or read or whatever. How I learned what I learned. Um, I had an opportunity to direct that piece, and those stories are just so good. And he talks a lot about his mother in those stories. His mother was so important to him. And one of the things I know, and that I was told as a young woman, and that I told my daughters too, whatever man you're going to be with, look at how he treats his mother.
Ooh, listen.
Look at how he talks about his mother. Who is his mother to him? Because that's telling. That's telling. If a man doesn't have a relationship with his mother, you better go the other way. Go the other way.
Can we talk about Bernice?
Oh, yeah.
Can we give some time to probably, in my mind, by my estimation, the one woman who could go toe to toe with any of the men in the entire canon? You know, with Rose and with Vera, you get a lot of the, you know, why wasn't I woman enough, or
yes.
the vulnerability,
Yes.
or you know, the woefully heartbroken, but I'll pull it together.
Bernice.
Bernice didn't
She'll
feel
pull a gun and shoot you.
Bernice and Louise felt like they were the same cloth, but the difference with Bernice felt like she didn't need to be so verbose. She knew her power. She knew where she stood with Willie and
Doker.
yeah.
You know, I mean, Bernice. Oh, what's his name? Avery.
Okay.
The guy.
Yeah.
The man.
Yeah.
Right? The one who wanted to marry her and kept pushing her.
Sure.
In that direction to be the wife. You know, the partner of the pastor.
Sure.
And the pastor is the leader, and that whole relationship of the man as the head. You know, and the woman as the helpmeet. You know, that. And Bernice is like, not so much, you know. How, I am whole. Basically, that's what she was telling me. I am whole as myself.
Yeah.
And I don't need a man to make, I'm not a half, I'm a whole.
Yeah.
Right? It's not my better half, that whole, she's like, you as a man can walk out of here and everything's all right with you. If you don't have a woman, you can be who you are. If you don't have a woman, but you're telling me that I need a man to be a whole woman, that conversation.
And men hadn't been good at writing female characters in that way.
Yes. That conversation, I mean, that's a real conversation.
Right. Yeah. I think of, writers like Pearl Cleage and Lynn Nottage. That woman showed up in their work.
Yes.
Hadn't seen it in Amir Baraka's or, where the trope was, this is my woman.
That's right.
Come with me. She's in my corner. And Bernice is like, there will be another one of you.
Yeah.
There will be another one of you. I'm a whole, fully realized person. And that felt like some Angela Davis level of independence.
Very revolutionary.
Yeah.
It was. And at a time too when, you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, and she was that example for her daughter too. A complete person.
Sure. I piano lesson. I'd say that's where the strength of that piece is.
Yes. I do too. I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
I pause sometimes because when you start I know the conversation about the women of Wilson's canon. Also, I'm very aware of not rewriting Wilson for the sake of
That's
my
right.
own interest,
Yes,
right?
yeah. We asked them if they had any questions, and then we just
Yeah,
kept
and we
going.
just kept talking.
Yeah. But we can't see that. We can't see
We
that.
have time for one question. One.
We have time for one question. Are we there? We're not.
We have
Oh my God, no, that's
16 minutes to turn this place over and get up to a performance.
That's
here.
true. I deny that.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
Hey, so the most recent play that we saw here was King Hedwig. And, I know you talked a little bit about Ruby, but can you talk about the women in that play since it's really fresh in some of our minds since we just saw it last week? Tawnya and
Tawnya.
because
Tawnya, the older Ruby.
Older Ruby.
Ruby from Seven Guitars,
Yes.
older because she forged that relationship with
Right.
Headley along the way.
Yeah. Well, we have our Tawnya right here.
oh hi.
Hi, Tanya.
Hello. Well,
Not Tanya,
gonna
but
make
you
a
know.
quick statement. You know, I thought that Tawnya stood up for herself because she said she didn't want to
have that
necessarily
baby.
have
Yeah.
the baby. She was her own person, and I thought she had quite a bit of agency. I don't know. Do you feel that way? I mean, I know that.
Well, I think what we were. I agree that she did. She was like, and that again, I recognize that it takes two to have a baby. I've had four, so I do know that. However, the vessel of the baby is the woman, and it is the body of the woman. The incubation and the care and nurturing is about. So I totally believe the woman has the right to choose and say no. I do not want this baby, and that woman has the right to say. And I know, and it's radical because a lot of people say, "Well, there's a father too, so doesn't the father have some say?" I say no. No, I said if you all want, my thing has always been stop regulating the uterus and start regulating the penis.
Yay!
Because without the penis, there is no baby. So yes, she had the right. She had the right to say. And that particular monologue too, very powerful because she's not only talking about the immediate, she's talking about the past and the future, all in that monologue, talking about all the women that have lost their children to this world, to the violence in this world.
I don't have a triangle, but you do have the school bell.
Anyway, but I think what Teresa, you were talking about was where it began, like piano lesson and Bernice.
Yeah.
Where it began, because Headley was one of the later pieces that August wrote. Yeah, it was one of the last pieces that he wrote. Right before
I think Headley in both his depiction in Seven Guitars and in King Headley is August.
Oh yes, I agree.
I think
agree with
if
that.
there's a manifestation of him
I
in
agree.
any of this, I think he's everywhere, of course, but I think that feels like where he lives. And to have made Ruby in a way his muse, because she felt so inconsequential in Seven Guitars, and then to come back and read King Headley, I was like, oh wait a minute, you know what? Sometimes you look up and you go, I had no idea that was going to make it, or I had no idea that was going to be a thing, and sure enough, and then there was a lot more depth and richness that he revisited with her.
In King Headley.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look, the duty of writing amazing women in our literature belongs to all of us, right? It doesn't necessarily fall on the shoulders of the most commercially successful writer.
That's right.
I think August Wilson really benefited from having all eyes on him for a matter of, 25, 30 years, that then fell on him the responsibility to speak on all of our behalf. And I think the amazing thing that he chose was to say no to that and still managed to do it anyway. I don't really call the 10 plays the Philadelphia cycle, the Pittsburgh cycle or the Century cycle. I call it the American cycle because it is American storytelling. And it's as American as anything that we have seen from any white playwright, because of its relatability, but also because of the insistence on showing our humanity despite everything. And he's speaking through a particular point of view, and then I go, okay, Pearl Cleage and Lynn Nottage and Dr. T and Leslie and myself and all of you, how are we contributing to?
How are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing?
What are we doing to contribute in making sure that those voices that we want amplified are done so?
It's our responsibility. All right. Thank you. Robert.